What's up, everyone? Stoic preview here. There's a moment just before you speak, just before you act, when your entire future hangs in the balance. In that moment, one word, one reaction can either build a bridge or burn it to the ground. Most people don't realize how much power they give away when they let their emotions run the show. Anger, fear, frustration, they feel like they're in control, but in reality, they're being controlled. Today, we're going to talk about habits that don't just help you manage your emotions, they help you master them. This isn't about becoming cold or detached, it's about being so steady, so grounded, that nothing outside of you can shake the inside of you. Imagine living with that kind of control, where your words are deliberate, your actions intentional, and your presence unshakable. That's the kind of life we're building here. If you believe in becoming the calm in life's storms, in shaping yourself into someone who can walk through chaos with clarity and purpose, then this is your place. Please subscribe, not just to watch videos, but to join a journey, one where each step takes you closer to the person you were always meant to be. Stick around until the end of this video, and you'll learn how to start living with that kind of quiet power. The 5-second reset, sometimes it takes only a split second for your entire mood, your relationships, or even the course of your day to change. One comment, one look, one situation, and suddenly you're somewhere you didn't want to be. You've felt it before, that rush in your chest, the tightening in your jaw, the quickening of your thoughts. It's like your body is screaming, "React now," without giving your mind a chance to think. This is the trap most people fall into. We live in that raw, unfiltered moment where emotion drives the car and reason is tied up in the trunk. If you've ever spoken words you couldn't take back or made choices you wish you could erase, you already know how expensive those moments can be. The Stoics warned us about this danger centuries ago. That's where the 5-second reset all comes in. At first glance, it sounds almost too simple. 5 seconds? How could that possibly change anything? But those 5 seconds are the difference between you owning your emotions and your emotions owning you. When you feel that rush of anger, frustration, or anxiety, your brain is getting hit with a chemical wave. Stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol are designed to push you into immediate action. It's an ancient survival mechanism. In the wild, reacting instantly could save your life, but in the modern world, that same impulse is more likely to damage your relationships, your career, or your peace of mind. Those 5 seconds are your first step in making the unconscious conscious, transforming that automatic reaction into a deliberate response. Here's how it works. The next time you feel yourself about to explode, whether it's in an argument with your partner, a tense meeting at work, or even a driver cutting you off, stop. Physically, mentally, emotionally, just stop. Close your eyes if you can. Take a deep, slow breath in and start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Feel your body. In that moment, you'll notice the tightness in your muscles loosening just slightly, your heart rate beginning to slow, your mind clearing enough to see the bigger picture. This is not about suppressing your emotions. It's about creating enough space for your wiser self to catch up with your emotional self. Think of it like this. You're driving down a busy road and someone suddenly swerves into your lane. Instinct tells you to slam the horn, yell something you can't take back, maybe even speed up just to make your point. But if you count to 5, you give yourself a moment to realize this person might be rushing to the hospital, they might have made a careless mistake, or maybe they just didn't see you. The point is, you don't know. But in those 5 seconds, you have the clarity to decide whether this is really worth carrying for the rest of your day. That's emotional self-defense. You're not pretending it didn't happen. You're choosing not to let it ruin your peace. The Stoics called this proairesis, the faculty of choice. It's the idea that while you can't control the chaos of the world, you can control the space between what happens and what you do next. The 5-second reset is the modern application of that principle. It's training your mind to step back from the ledge, to resist the urge to jump headfirst into the heat of the moment. And here's the thing, it's not going to be perfect at first. You'll forget to do it sometimes. Other times, you'll make it to 3 before blurting something out you wish you hadn't. But every time you succeed, even if it's just once in a while, you're rewiring your brain to prioritize control over chaos. That's what growth looks like. From a psychological perspective, those 5 seconds also shift activity from your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes emotional responses, toward your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thinking and decision-making. In other words, you're literally giving your brain time to switch from fight or flight mode into think-it-through mode. Aristotle said, "Anybody can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power and is not easy." The 5-second reset is how you begin to gain that power. Now let's be real. 5 seconds won't make your problems vanish. It won't turn you into a Zen monk overnight, but it will keep you from pouring gasoline on a fire that could have burned itself out. Think about the last time you regretted something you said. What if you had given yourself 5 seconds to breathe before answering? Would you have said the same thing? Would you have said it in the same way? More often than not, the answer is no. Those 5 seconds are a gift you give to yourself and to everyone around you. They say, "I'm in control here. My emotions don't get to dictate my behavior." Imagine applying this habit everywhere. Your partner makes a sharp comment, 5 seconds. Your boss criticizes your work in front of others, 5 seconds. A stranger online writes something insulting, 5 seconds. Over time, you start realizing how many storms pass on their own without you needing to step into them. That's the quiet power the Stoics admired, the ability to remain unmoved by every passing wave. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This habit is the living proof of that philosophy in action. And here's where it becomes more than just a trick. It becomes a way of life. You start to see that it's not about counting, it's about cultivating presence. The 5-second reset is simply a doorway into a bigger discipline: mindfulness, self-awareness, emotional resilience. When you practice it, you're telling yourself, "I value my peace more than I value winning this argument. I value my integrity more than I value this fleeting surge of pride." And every time you make that choice, you become someone you respect a little more. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are isn't defined by your worst reactions in your worst moments. You are defined by the choices you make in the quiet space between stimulus and response." The 5-second reset is your tool for protecting that space. Use it, protect it, honor it. Because one day you'll look back on situations where you could have let your emotions burn everything down, and instead, you'll see how you built something better simply because you paused long enough to remember what actually mattered. Dig into the why. There's a strange thing about emotional reactions. They're rarely about what's happening right now. Sure, it feels like they are. Someone says something, does something, or looks at you a certain way, and it's like they've lit a match inside you. But if you slow down and really pay attention, you'll notice that the flame didn't start in that moment. It started somewhere else, maybe years ago, maybe even decades. The present event just happened to throw a little gasoline on it. This is why taking a step back is so powerful. Most people don't even consider doing it. They think their anger is just about the rude comment. Their sadness is just about the bad news. Their anxiety is just about the thing on their schedule tomorrow. But the mind is a layered thing. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to look beneath the surface, because the surface is where your instincts live, but not where your wisdom lives. If you're willing to look deeper, beyond the words someone spoke, beyond the moment that just happened, you'll often find an older story playing out. Maybe a teacher once humiliated you in front of the class, and now, decades later, a coworker's sarcastic remark stirs up the same sense of humiliation. Maybe you were overlooked growing up, and now being ignored in a meeting cuts far deeper than the situation calls for. You think it's about the moment, but your body thinks it's about survival. When you start asking yourself questions, why this? Why now? Why them? You're creating space for something the Stoics valued above almost anything: perspective. Epictetus taught, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them." And if your view is clouded by old pain, you're not actually seeing the moment for what it is. The other person becomes a stand-in for someone from your past, and you hand them far more emotional power than they deserve. By digging into the why, you reclaim that power. You start realizing that while you can't control the first wave of feeling that hits you, you can control what you do next. And that's everything. Let's be honest though, digging into the why is not always comfortable. In fact, sometimes it's downright painful. It means admitting to yourself that a part of you is still wounded. It means confronting insecurities you'd rather pretend don't exist. It means looking at the messy, complicated truth of who you are, not just the polished version you show to the world. But here's the thing, avoiding it doesn't make it go away. It just keeps it in the driver's seat, where it will continue to steer you into the same conflicts, the same arguments, the same regrets. Jung believed that the unexamined parts of ourselves, what he called the shadow, hold enormous influence over our lives until we face them. By digging into the why, you're shining a light on that shadow. And light, as you know, changes everything. Think of a time you completely overreacted to something small. Maybe someone was late to meet you, and you felt unreasonably upset. On the surface, it's about the lateness. But maybe deep down, it's about feeling disrespected, overlooked, or unimportant. Feelings that have roots in your history, not in this specific person's actions. When you start tracing the emotion back, you begin to see patterns. You notice that certain types of people, words, or situations always seem to hit you harder. And instead of assuming the world is out to get you, you start realizing, oh, this is my stuff. This is my work to do. That shift alone is liberating. You're no longer a passive passenger on the ride. You're in the driver's seat, steering toward better choices. Stoics often practiced a mental exercise called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. They would imagine possible hardships and think through how they might feel, why they might feel that way, and how they would respond. This was not pessimism, it was preparation. They understood that if you wait until you're in the middle of an emotional storm to figure out your triggers, you're already too late. By anticipating, by asking why before the crisis comes, you're building emotional muscle that can hold you steady when life gets loud. And here's where modern psychology and ancient wisdom meet. Therapists today often use techniques like emotional tracing or root cause analysis to help people separate the trigger from the true source of their reaction. It's the same idea the Stoics used. If you can find the root, you can weaken the weed. Without that understanding, you're just cutting the leaves, and they'll grow back again and again. Now, this isn't about blaming yourself for every bad feeling you have. It's about owning your reactions enough to transform them. When you feel triggered, instead of immediately firing back or shutting down, pause. Ask yourself, what does this remind me of? Where have I felt this before? Am I reacting to the present, or am I reliving the past? You might not have all the answers right away. That's okay. The act of asking changes your relationship to the feeling. It turns it from a command into a clue. Imagine this playing out in a real-world scenario. Your friend makes a joke about something personal, and you feel that familiar sting. The old you might have snapped back, gone quiet for the rest of the night, or carried the resentment for weeks. But this time, you catch it. You ask yourself, why did that land so hard? And you realize it's not just the joke. It's that it touched on a vulnerability you've been carrying since childhood. Maybe you felt misunderstood back then, and now the same feeling has resurfaced. Your anger softens. You're not just in fight mode, you're in understanding mode. You can choose to tell your friend why it bothered you, or you can choose to let it go because you see it for what it is, not an attack, but a trigger. That choice is where your strength lives. The deeper you go with this practice, the more you'll notice a side effect: compassion. When you understand that your own reactions often come from old wounds, it becomes easier to see that other people's reactions do too. That coworker who overreacts in meetings, maybe they were never taken seriously at home. That friend who's overly defensive, maybe they were criticized more than they were praised. This doesn't mean you excuse bad behavior. It means you approach it with more perspective, which gives you more options in how to respond. And here's the real beauty of it. The more you practice asking why, the less often you'll get stuck in the same emotional loops. You start catching yourself earlier. You start seeing the patterns before they play out, and slowly, the things that used to set you off lose their power. You're no longer a match waiting for a spark. You're the one holding the extinguisher, fully aware of where the flames might start and ready to keep them from spreading. Marcus Aurelius once advised himself, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Digging into the why is how you revoke that power from the triggers in your life and return it to yourself. It's how you stop reacting blindly and start responding with the kind of clarity that changes not just your day, but the way you live. Don't let resentment brew. It's strange how we think time will heal certain wounds, when in reality it often just hides them under thicker layers of dust. We tell ourselves, I'll get over it, or it's not worth bringing up. But the truth is, unresolved tension doesn't dissolve. It ferments. What starts as a small irritation becomes a low hum in the background of your mind, quietly influencing your mood, your words, and even your decisions. Resentment is like emotional mold. It spreads silently, and by the time you notice it, it's already affecting everything around it. The Stoics would have recognized this pattern easily. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." But here's the thing. If you're carrying resentment, you may think you're being the better person, when in reality, you're still chained to the person or event you're trying to rise above. Holding on to resentment is exhausting, not just emotionally, but physically. Studies in psychology show that suppressed anger and bitterness can increase stress levels, weaken your immune system, and even affect your sleep. You might think you're ignoring it, but your body isn't fooled. It keeps score. Carl Jung wrote, "What you resist persists." If you resist acknowledging your resentment, it doesn't disappear. It burrows deeper, shaping your inner world in ways you don't always see. That's why the Stoics spoke so much about clarity and truth. They understood that facing reality, no matter how uncomfortable, is the first step to freedom. Pretending you're fine is not the same as actually being fine. The danger with letting resentment brew is that it changes you subtly. You might become colder, more guarded, or more cynical without even realizing it. You might avoid certain people, places, or conversations, not because the present moment is dangerous, but because the past is still whispering in your ear. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." That's not about blaming yourself. It's about recognizing that as long as you hold on to resentment, you are cooperating with the very thing that hurt you. You're letting it keep its grip on your life. The antidote isn't denial, it's confrontation, not the aggressive, point a finger and shout kind, but the courageous, clear and calm kind. It's saying, this happened, it hurt, and I'm willing to talk about it. It's addressing the wound before it festers into something bigger. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It forces you to be vulnerable, but vulnerability is not weakness. It's the doorway to real resolution. Aristotle believed that virtue lies in the balance between extremes, in this case, between explosive anger and silent bitterness. By having the conversation, you're choosing the middle path, neither bottling it up nor letting it erupt. Think about how resentment behaves in relationships. A friend cancels on you repeatedly without explanation. You don't say anything, telling yourself it's not worth the drama. But over time, every text they send irritates you a little more. You stop answering as quickly. Your tone shifts. One day, something small sets you off, and you react in a way that surprises even you. The friend is confused because they don't see the months of silent frustration that built up in the shadows. This is what happens when you let resentment pile up. It turns molehills into mountains, and by the time you try to climb them, you're already out of breath. From a Stoic perspective, addressing resentment early is a way of maintaining inner order. The injury might be a single moment, but resentment makes you relive it over and over. Each time it leaves another scratch on your peace of mind. And here's the most ironic part. While you're carrying all that weight, the person you're resentful toward may not even know. They're living their life while you're lugging around an invisible burden they don't feel. That's why holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. It just doesn't work that way. Now, confronting resentment doesn't always mean confronting the person directly. Sometimes the conversation you need to have is with yourself. Maybe the person is no longer in your life, or maybe speaking to them isn't safe or healthy. In that case, your work is internal. You write about it. You say the things you wish you could say out loud. You allow yourself to feel the anger fully, not as an indulgence, but as a way to process it and move it through you. The Stoics practiced view from above, imagining life from a wider perspective. When you zoom out far enough, you realize that most grudges shrink in size compared to the whole span of your life. That perspective doesn't erase the hurt, but it does make it easier to loosen your grip. Carl Jung believed that what we leave unexamined in ourselves often gets projected onto others. If you've ever found yourself suddenly irritated by someone for no clear reason, it might be because they mirror a part of yourself you haven't accepted. Resentment can sometimes be less about the other person's flaw and more about your own unacknowledged pain. By doing the work, reflecting, writing, asking hard questions, you separate the real wound from the imagined one. That clarity is liberating. It's also worth remembering that resentment thrives in silence. Left unspoken, it grows wild. This is why clear communication is not just a relationship skill. It's a form of emotional hygiene. You wouldn't leave your home uncleaned for months and expect it to be pleasant to live in. Why treat your inner life any differently? When something bothers you, speak up. Not with hostility, but with honesty. When you said that, I felt hurt. When this happened, I felt overlooked. It's simple but powerful. You're not accusing, you're revealing. And in that revealing, you create a space where resolution is possible. The Stoics knew that emotional control doesn't mean emotional avoidance. Marcus Aurelius admitted in his journals that he had to deal with difficult people daily, but he also reminded himself that those people were part of the same human family, subject to the same flaws and weaknesses he carried himself. This mindset doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment, but it does mean recognizing the shared humanity in those who hurt us. When you see that, resentment loses some of its sharpness. Picture this. You're carrying a heavy bag of rocks. Each rock is a grudge, a slight, an unresolved tension. Some of them you picked up years ago, Others you added just last week. At first, you tell yourself it's fine, you're strong enough. But over time, the bag gets heavier and you start moving slower. Life feels harder, not because the world has changed, but because you're weighed down. Now imagine setting that bag down, the relief, the lightness, the freedom to move again. That's what letting go of resentment feels like. Seneca said, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Resentment makes you suffer before, during, and long after the original event. Letting it go doesn't mean you approve of what happened. It means you refuse to keep suffering for it. You choose your own peace over the satisfaction of holding on. And that choice, repeated over time, changes you. You become lighter, quicker to forgive, not because you're naive, but because you're wise enough to know that bitterness costs more than it's worth. In the end, resentment is a debt you pay for someone else's actions. The Stoics, Jung, Aristotle, they all, in different ways, urged us to stop paying that debt. Face the tension, have the conversation, do the inner work, not for them, but for you. Because the moment you stop letting resentment brew is the moment you start reclaiming your energy, your clarity, and your life. And that, more than any grudge, is worth holding on to. Anti. Name it to tame it. There are moments in life when your emotions feel like a tangled ball of wires, knotted, messy, and impossible to separate. You know you're feeling something, but it's so jumbled you can't quite put your finger on what it is. One minute you're irritated, the next you're sad, and then suddenly you're snapping at someone for no clear reason. That's the tricky part about emotions. When they go unnamed, they roam free, causing chaos wherever they please. The truth is, when you don't take the time to identify what you're feeling, your emotions start running the show, silently pulling strings while you think you're in control. The Stoics had a very practical view on emotions. They didn't deny that feelings existed. They simply believed that in order to live a good life, you had to understand them, question them, and put them in their proper place. When you can label what's happening inside you, it's like turning on the light in a dark room. The monsters look smaller, the shadows lose their shape, and you can finally see where to step next. This is the essence of name it to tame it. You can't fix what you can't define. Imagine going to the doctor and saying, "I just feel bad." That's not enough for them to know if you've pulled a muscle, caught a virus, or broken a bone. They need specifics. The same goes for your emotional health. If you simply say, "I'm upset," you're dealing with a vague cloud of feeling that could be anger, disappointment, fear, guilt, or a mix of all four. But when you stop and ask yourself, "What exactly am I feeling?" you start peeling away the layers of confusion. Suddenly, you're not fighting a faceless enemy. You're dealing with something you can understand, something you can respond to. Modern psychology backs this up. Neuroscientists have found that simply labeling an emotion, literally putting it into words, can reduce its intensity. It's called affect labeling, and it works because naming the feeling activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reasoning and decision-making. In other words, you're moving the experience out of the purely emotional part of your brain and into the rational part. That's how you stop spiraling and start thinking clearly again. Epictetus would have appreciated this science. He taught that it's not events themselves that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. Naming your emotion is the first step to changing that interpretation. Let's look at a real-world example. Say you're working on a project and someone makes a comment that hits you the wrong way. You immediately feel hot in the face, your chest tightens, and you want to fire back with something sharp. If you don't pause to identify what's happening, you might think, "I'm angry." But maybe you're not truly angry. Maybe you're embarrassed because you felt criticized in front of others. Or maybe you're anxious because their comment made you doubt your abilities. Those are very different emotions, and they require different responses. Anger might push you to defend yourself. Embarrassment might push you to avoid the situation. and anxiety might push you to seek reassurance, but you'll only choose the right path if you know which emotion you're actually dealing with. The Stoics would tell you that emotions are like signals. They're there to inform you, not to control you. When you can't name what you're feeling, you suffer twice. First, from the emotion itself, and second, from the confusion of not knowing what to do with it. That's why the act of naming it is so powerful. It's not about pretending the feeling isn't there. It's about understanding exactly what it is so you can deal with it properly. And let's be honest, sometimes what we call anger is actually hurt. Sometimes frustration is just unspoken fear, and sometimes sadness is really exhaustion in disguise. By naming your emotions, you strip away the false labels you've been living with and replace them with truth. This doesn't magically make the feeling disappear, but it changes your relationship with it. You go from being inside the storm to standing outside, watching it pass, knowing it will move on. There's also a level of self-respect involved here. Taking the time to figure out exactly what you're feeling is a way of saying, my inner world matters. I'm worth understanding. It's easy to dismiss our emotions as overreactions or to push them aside because they feel inconvenient. But the Stoics never said to ignore yourself. They said to know yourself. Aristotle famously wrote, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." Naming your emotions is one of the simplest yet most profound ways to start knowing yourself better. Think about how this plays out in your relationships. If you walk into a conversation saying, "I'm mad at you," the other person will likely get defensive. But if you can say, "I felt hurt when you said that," or "I felt left out when that decision was made," you shift the dynamic entirely. Now, it's not about accusation, it's about clarity. And clarity is where understanding begins. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You can't become who you truly are if you're lost in a fog of unnamed emotions. It's also worth noting that naming your emotions doesn't mean indulging them. The Stoics didn't believe in wallowing, and neither should you. Once you've named the feeling, the next step is to decide what to do with it. That's where your philosophy, your values, and your self-discipline come into play. The feeling might be valid, but that doesn't mean every reaction is. Epictetus advised, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Mastery starts with awareness. You can't master what you refuse to even look at. Over time, this practice becomes second nature. You'll catch yourself mid-reaction and think, wait, what am I actually feeling right now? You'll get better at noticing the difference between irritation and disappointment, between fear and excitement, between guilt and shame. And that awareness will make you calmer, more thoughtful, and more in control. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming emotionally intelligent. And the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more resilient you become in the face of life's challenges. Naming your emotions is like mapping uncharted territory. At first, it feels awkward. You're not sure which paths to take or how to describe the landscape, but the more you practice, the clearer the map becomes. Eventually, when an emotion rises up, you'll know exactly where you are and how to navigate through it. Naming your emotion is the first step toward changing that judgment, toward reclaiming your ability to see clearly and act wisely. And here's the thing, emotions aren't the enemy. They're part of being human. They're like visitors knocking at your door. If you ignore them, they might pound harder. If you let them in without asking who they are, they might make a mess. But if you open the door, greet them by name, and decide how long they can stay, you remain the host. That's the essence of the Stoic approach, to acknowledge reality, understand it, and respond in a way that aligns with your highest self. Next time you feel that storm brewing inside you, don't rush to silence it or let it take over. Stop, breathe, and ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling? Name it, own it. And in that moment, you'll discover what the Stoics knew all along. Naming your emotions is the first step to taming them. and taming them is the first step to true strength. Point 5. Keep stress in check. There's a reason why the same small annoyance can roll off your back one day and completely unravel you the next. Not always about the event itself. It's about the state you're already in when it happens. If your mind is calm, if your energy is balanced, you can navigate challenges with clarity. But when you're worn down, running on empty, and carrying a pile of invisible pressures, even the tiniest inconvenience can feel like a personal attack. This is what stress does. It magnifies every emotion. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it." And our judgment is never more clouded than when we're stressed. Stress doesn't just live in your body, it lives in your perception, quietly distorting the way you see the world. Think about a day when you woke up after a good night's sleep, had a slow morning, maybe even got some exercise or fresh air. On that kind of day, you can handle traffic delays or an offhand comment without much fuss. Now think about a day when you're running late, skipped breakfast, and your phone is buzzing nonstop. That same traffic feels like a personal insult, the delay feels catastrophic, and the offhand comment feels like a direct attack on your worth. The difference isn't in the events, it's in you. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." If you don't notice the stress building inside you, you'll mistake every external challenge for the real problem, when in reality the storm started within. Stress is sneaky because it rarely announces itself with flashing lights. It builds slowly, weaving itself into your daily life until you can't tell where normal ends and overworked begins. And because we've normalized it, wearing busy like a badge of honor, we often ignore the quiet signals our body and mind are sending us. That's all for today, everyone. I hope these 5 habits give you some powerful tools to start mastering your emotions. Remember, this isn't about becoming a robot. It's about becoming the calm, clear, and capable person you're meant to be. If this video resonated with you, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Stoic Preview for more content like this. Let me know in the comments below which of these habits you're going to try first. Until next time, stay grounded, stay intentional, and keep building the life you want. Peace.